Hello, my name is Mason, and I'm here with Andrew, Nicole, Alicia, and Noah, and we're here to talk about process costing and how it relates to the Ford Motor Company. Just a few terms that go along with costing systems is cost object, which is anything for which a measurement of costs is desired. Direct costs, which is economically feasible costs or costs that you can directly attribute to the product or cost object. Indirect costs are non-economically feasible costs or costs that aren't as directly related to the cost object. Cost pools are groupings of indirect costs, and then a cost allocation base is the link between the indirect costs, cost pools, and cost objects. And now Andrew's going to take it away and talk about process costings and what that is.
Process costing systems are used when the unit cost of a product or service is obtained by assigning total costs to many identical or similar units of output. This includes average production costs that might be accumulated over the course of a product line and then distributed back into the many identical products. Similar identical products that are hard to differentiate between, that are not necessarily made to be the same, but turn out that way as the end result. And each unit receives the same or similar amounts of direct material costs, direct manufacturing labor costs, or indirect manufacturing costs. This can include the difference between a amount of direct materials such as wood or lumber used to create a product, direct manufacturing labor costs, the people and man hours that go into the production of a product, and indirect manufacturing costs, which is also considered overhead, which would be the accumulation or cost pool of indirect costs associated with process costing. Process costing allocation is done when cost categories are used as cost objects in process costing and are created as new costs are introduced into the processing of a product. These are separated by direct, indirect, labor costs, and introduction into the process. A direct cost category may be the lumber produced from a tree. The indirect would be the paperwork associated with the production of a product. The labor costs would be the man hours and machine hours used to create the product. And whether or not they were introduced at the beginning of the process, such as the cutting down of the tree, or later on during the paperwork or during the construction of the product, each of these would be separated into separate cost categories in order to allow more accurate process costing allocation. Now I'll pass it over to Alicia, who will provide background on Ford Motor Company and their operations.
So a little bit of background of Ford is that it was first incorporated by Henry Ford in 1903. A year after that, they opened the first international location in Canada. The first model was a car which was called Model A, and then it would later created Model T in 1908, which became even more famous. They did introduce the integrated assembly line to the auto industry in 1913. Also in 1922, they acquired the Lincoln Motor Company, and then in 1932, they did introduce the V8 engine. Lastly, they became publicly traded in 1956, sorry. So some operations of Ford does operate in 16 different countries, which are China, Romania, and Mexico. It does continue to innovate in autonomous vehicles. It progresses towards a green environment with zero carbon emissions. It does invest in green vehicles for a brighter future, and it creates a successful portfolio of mobility offer for consumers. Now Nicole will take over explaining more about Ford.
So Ford business, the purpose of Ford is to revolutionize mobility fluid by new challenges and creating solutions to build a better world for everyone. Ford's business includes designing, manufacturing, marketing, and servicing a full line of Ford's cars, trucks, and sports utility vehicles. Ford operates in 4 segments, which are automotive, financial service, smart mobility LLC, and central treasury operations. Ford and process costing. In 2019, Ford produced over 5 million vehicles. An example would be a Ford factory producing 50,000 F-150s. The costs would then be separated between the basic package F-150s and limited versions of the model. The primary product, which is the automobiles, the processed in large quantities, and it requires similar parts and processes and different terms and models and furnishings. Now I'm going to hand it off to Noah to finish processing costing.
All right, so looking at a bit of a process costing in use. So process costing accounting systems record the cost of production for each operation needed to manufacture the finished product. For example, let's say there are 10 procedures to create an F-150. These 10 procedures would be recorded separately by the accounting department, and at the end of production, they would be added together to get the sum, which would be the overall cost of production. This overall cost of production would then be divided by the number of units sold to produce the cost per individual product produced. So our formula gives us the cost for each individual part that's produced on a mass quantity. So on an assembly line, we're producing a bunch of F-150s, we can find the cost per each one of those F-150s. And to look at it a bit deeper, we'll look at some of the benefits. So there's the simple documentation of the cost. It's very efficient when we're creating a lot of different vehicles to use process costing rather than job costing. Rather than trying to look at each individual little expense that's related to that vehicle, we can look at the overall expense. It saves us time, it saves us labor, and it makes it a lot easier. It eliminates this repetitive recording process, and it's consistent, keeps consistent pricing among the similar products, and it gives an accurate recording based on the line of production rather than many individual little products. Looking at some of our references, we used our book, some from a Ford Motor Company, and random other various articles. All right, that wraps up our presentation on process costing and Ford. Our group had the privilege of looking a little bit into Ford and process costing and relating that all together, help us grow our knowledge in accounting. So we want to say thank you for taking the time to listen.